Well, hello and welcome to the Quadruple D, a show within a show on the CWT podcast, the Critical Weight Theory. And this is episode 69, part 2, and it continues looking at comedians who have ruined their legacies. So, in the last installment, I looked at Bill Maher and Jerry Seinfeld, and this time, today, the peripheral poophead of the week is Roseanne Barr. That's right, I'm calling her a peripheral poophead. Um, the other segment, I guess you could also say there were poop heads, but in a way, Roseanne Barr is the worst, so she kind of wins this award for the week because it's like a real betrayal for me, her little political transformation. Now, if you're under a certain age, it's easy to forget just how massive Roseanne used to be. And no, I'm not talking about her weight. That's like a cheap joke you could throw in there. But that's actually an interesting part of her legacy. She was a larger woman, and, she kind of normalized the presence of larger ladies on TV. So that's really a part of her legacy. And for the final two seasons of her hit ABC sitcom, Roseanne, she was pulling in $40 million. So that made her the second highest paid woman in show business at the time. And she was right behind Oprah Winfrey in terms of the stardom level. She was all over the place. She was on tabloids. She appeared in Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, in a Freddy Krueger movie, and she generated controversy all the time. She obviously sang the Star Spangled Banner. She butchered that song intentionally, I believe, and the media just could not get enough of her. She was a powerhouse who actually won both an Emmy and a Golden Globe, so you can't say that she did not have her heyday. But what made Roseanne a cultural phenomenon wasn't only the ratings, it was what the show stood for. Back in the late 80s and 90s, TV was packed with these affluent families, like the Cosby Show, for example. I don't know if Bill Cosby's family on that show was supposed to be like super rich, but they were obviously pretty well off. The Connors, however, were different. Roseanne was a different show. They were the blue collar antidote. They struggled with low wages, mountain high debt, layoffs, and the exhausting everyday reality of grinding under capitalism. So, even deeper, the show aggressively ran toward heavy social issues that networks used to run away from pretty often. Like, they had domestic violence as an issue, reproductive rights, systemic racism probably was something they talked about here and there, and LGBTQ visibility. There was actually an episode where Roseanne discussed the Riot Girl phenomenon. Like the subcategory of punk rock known as Riot Girl. So she was pretty far out there in terms of discussing progressive topics. In fact, in 1994, Roseanne featured one of the very first same sex kisses on primetime television. So she was pretty far removed from being a right wing content creator at the time. And that was a key component of her brand, you might say. The entire appeal of the show was rooted in a fierce anti authoritarian skepticism as well. The Connors clashed with bosses, bureaucracies, and traditional social expectations. It didn't glorify wealth or power, it championed ordinary people trying to survive in an unequal system. Well, at least until the ninth season, anyway. That's where the show really kind of went downhill for a lot of people because, well, spoiler alert, the Connors won the lottery. And for a lot of people, that kind of ruined the show. It sort of defeats the whole point, like the whole premise of focusing on the average American type of family. And that brings us to the truly baffling part of the story, the transformation of Roseanne Barr herself. Now, there's evidence that she doesn't even understand always what the issues are, perhaps, and that she just attaches herself to various different political causes and movements. I don't know. I guess you'll be the judge of that on your own, but there might be some truth to that. Anyway, fans who watched the early career saw someone who wasn't just progressive. She was maybe even a little bit radical, actually. In 2012, she literally ran for president of the United States, seeking the Green Party nomination, campaigning on what could be called a far left socialist platform of single payer health care, forgiving all mortgage debt, and legalizing marijuana, among probably other things, and, being anti war and stuff like that. So, when she lost the nomination to Jill Stein, she didn't give up. She actually ran on the Peace and Freedom Party ticket with anti war activist Cindy Sheehan. So maybe she wasn't the most radical left leaning person, but you could say she was somewhere in that ballpark. But then the political gears in her head started grinding into a completely different gear. By 2016, she briefly morphed into an outspoken, elite adjacent defender of Hillary Clinton, even once claiming to reporters that without Roseanne Connor paving the way for strong women in the cultural mainstream, there wouldn't even be a Hillary Clinton. And she also defended her support of Hillary by saying hoes before bros. Like, because obviously Hillary Clinton ran against Barack Obama at the time. So she was still at that time, a relatively progressive figure, but maybe moving a little bit more towards what is called the center, if you will. But that mainstream liberal phase evaporated almost overnight. Within months, she didn't just walk across the political aisle, she leaped over it into full MAGA territory. She went from writing in her own name to drinking the absolute deepest flavors of the Trump Kool Aid, aggressively boosting far right culture wars and QAnon conspiracy theories online. And you might have heard a Twitter notification sound at some point in your life. And if you've ever heard that, you know that sometimes you get a dumb message. And what do you know? Roseanne was capable of making some dumb tweets of her own. It all blew up in 2018. Against all odds, ABC revived Roseanne, and it was a massive ratings juggernaut, and she ruined it all with Twitter. The honeymoon was short lived because Roseanne went on Twitter and fired off a wildly racist tweet targeting former Obama advisor Valerie Jarrett, comparing her to the Planet of the Apes and the Muslim Brotherhood, which was something that did not go over very well for a lot of people. ABC itself did not hesitate. They called the remark abhorrent, canceled the show basically immediately, and recast the remaining family into the spin off, The Connors. And Roseanne's excuse? She called it a bad joke. And, well, it was bad, but a lot of people didn't really see what the joke even was. It was just her making a weirdly racist and Islamophobic statement. And since then, she has fully integrated into the right wing ecosystem, releasing a Fox Nation comedy special in 2023 called, get this, it's very witty, not at all predictable, Cancel This. That's right, that was the name of her little comedy special. And She is actually somebody that, at the very least, you could say was kind of literally canceled because her show was yanked away from her. And I'll let you say about that what you want, but I will say I was never really on board with watching the Roseanne remake in the first place. So it wasn't just about this controversy. I just never watched an episode of it, even before that happened. So, for millions of longtime fans, I don't know why I said fams, fans, this wasn't, it wasn't just a tiny little political shift. It felt like a betrayal because it makes her previous groundbreaking work feel completely empty, or something like that, something near emptiness anyway. I couldn't technically still watch old episodes of that show, and it still holds up surprisingly well, but the problem is, it all seems empty now, kind of. It seems more fake than it did back then because her whole personality seems like it must have been an act or something like that. Like, I don't know, you tell me what exactly was going on there. Was she just uh trying to appeal to the masses at the time? Is that what she is, just a chameleon, a social chameleon? She has no actual beliefs or principles or whatever. You tell me what was going on that whole time. But anyway, the original Roseanne character, she questioned authority from the bottom up, and she at times stood up for the marginalized. And the modern Roseanne Barr, she has tied her identity to a ridiculously partisan movement that punches directly at those down below, just viciously attacking minorities of all types, basically, especially immigrants and trans people, but certainly all types of different people. Um, and it's just a complete transformation, and it is a little bit sad. I'm gonna say it. It's a sad fact. And the real lesson here, though, is don't reduce this all to a simple left versus right issue. It's a cautionary tale about celebrity culture in general. It shows how easily we're conditioned to tie political movements to big individual personalities, whether it's a corporation, a political party, or a sitcom star. We have to remain skeptical of concentrated power and demands for unyielding personal loyalty, lest we become a cult under another dumb cult leader. Because at the end of the day, a celebrity's wild personal transformation doesn't deserve your fandom if it leads you and the whole country further down a darkened path. So keep your skepticism sharp. Don't just blindly follow a celebrity or even a political movement in general. Just apply common sense. And I'll see you next episode.